If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Their call signs are Dub and Odessa. Don't think anything bad. Translated from Ukrainian, Dub means oak tree, and not something that is likely to be found in the Scoop de Ville's glove compartment. The guy took such a call sign, most likely because of the first letters of his last name. And the call sign of the second fighter, Odessa, arose because of the place of birth. He was born in the city of Odessa in southern Ukraine. At the time of the creation of this video, this combat crew had at least 13 boxes on its account. Here too, it's simple. Boxes is what Ukrainian fighters call the large vehicles of the Russians. This includes tanks, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, armored vehicles, and trucks that carry ammunition, fuel, or personnel. In civilian life, Dub worked as a surveyor. The guy created topographic plans for the construction of buildings and roads. Before the war, his instrument was a level on a tripod, and after February 24th, the Stugna P anti-tank missile system, which is located on a similar tripod, became his weapon. The profession of a fighter with the call sign Odessa is no less peaceful. He worked in a construction hypermarket as a sales assistant, and he can certainly advise which building mixture is best used for finishing the facade or bathroom. But on February 24th, he voluntarily appeared at the assembly point, and after a few hours, he was on the front line. How long did it take for the seller of a construction hypermarket to become the operator of the Stugna P ATGM? Everything depends on the individual. Odessa mastered this weapon in a couple of hours. It is customary to talk about the territorial defense forces as light infantry without heavy equipment and serious anti-tank weapons, but it is not always the case. The 1st Special Purpose Brigade, named after Ivan Bohun of the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, has anti-tank batteries. Each battery consists of several combat crews armed with Stugna P ATGM. They cover the actions of the fighters of all battalions of the brigade. In one of our previous videos, we already talked about the heroic Russian tank hunter. The difference from the heroes of this video is in weapons and tactics of warfare. These nuances should be discussed in more detail. The Stugna P ATGM is perhaps one of the few Ukrainian-made weapons that outperform American and European counterparts in terms of combat performance. The range of the Stugna P ATGM reaches 16.5 thousand feet. This is twice as much as the famous FGM-148 Javelin. True, the American ATGM operates on the principle of fire and forget. That is, immediately after the shot, the fighter can hide in a shelter or change position so as not to fall under return fire. And if there is no danger of return fire, the shooter can prepare the next launch. Thanks to the IR head, the launched Javelin missile itself reaches the target. This ability gives the right to classify the FGM-148 to the 3rd generation of anti-tank systems. But Stugna P is more effective than Javelin, although it belongs to the 2nd generation of anti-tank weapons. How can this be? The fact is that the IR head reacts to heat. If the second target is located next to an already knocked out tank, then the Javelin missile will react specifically to it. Russian crews have learned to use this. Under the cover of a downed colleague, other tanks can safely continue to carry out their combat mission. For Javelin, they are out of reach. The Stugna ATGM missiles do not have such a disadvantage. They fly towards the target along a laser path and do not react to heat. The missile is controlled by the operator of the complex using a joystick. Thanks to this solution, the deviation from the target does not exceed 2.5 inches. This is literally sniper work, so the rocket hits the weakest point of the tank, for example, the ammo rack. A successful operator of the Stugna P ATGM can even get into the embrasure of a bunker. However, commanders usually insist on more expensive targets. The priority target is always the tank. Then follow the armored personnel carrier or infantry fighting vehicle. Light armored vehicles and vehicles are the last target. It's all about the cost. One shot of Stugna costs $20,000. Although this is 5 times cheaper than a shot from a Javelin, it is still very expensive by Ukrainian standards. The soldiers joke that one launch of the Stugna is equal to the cost of a one-room apartment in Poltava or Ivano-Frankivsk. The first shot in the combat career of the Ukrainian crew turned out to be extremely successful. The detached turret of the tank made 3 revolutions in the air, so $20,000 was not spent in vain. This happened near the village of Novosolovka, Donetsk region. In the early morning, the Russians went on the attack with large forces in the direction of the village of Shandrigolovo. A diversionary maneuver was an attack toward the village of Prishep. It was clear that the Russians were trying to either take Novosolovka or Pincers or go around it on the right in order to hit the Ukrainian positions from behind. At the beginning of the attack, it was difficult to understand the true intentions of the Russians. But the commander of the Ukrainian battalion correctly determined the direction of the enemy's main attack. Most likely, drones and early dawn played a role. In eastern Ukraine, the sun rises early. The battalion commander detected the movement of Russian equipment in the direction of Shandrigolovo in time. Therefore, anti-tank crew went to meet the attackers. The crew had to act quickly, but without fuss and undue stress. The joystick of the Stugna P ATGM control panel is extremely sensitive. The operator's hand should not tremble. But when you first perform a combat mission, it's hard not to be nervous, especially when the soldiers of the battalion holding the defense are very hopeful for your fire support. In such a situation, it is better not to show that you are a beginner. One must find the strength and audacity to act confidently. Otherwise, your nervousness will be felt by the rest of the fighters. The Ukrainian anti-tank crew took a good position. The Russian column stretched out on the horizon within the limits of Stugna's effectiveness. Fortunately, Ukrainian fighters do not need to carry ATGMs and missiles on their backs. Usually, anti-tank crews travel in minibuses or pickups. On the part of the Russians, several tanks and armored personnel carriers participated in the breakthrough. At the moment of a breakthrough, tanks are especially vulnerable, because the crews do not have information about the change in the combat situation at the current moment. And if the breakthrough is carried out from the depths of the rear, then the tank commanders are without information for a long time. This column advanced in the dark. The Ukrainian crew had time to assess the situation and plan the attack. Here, one important feature of the Ukrainian anti-tank systems played a role, which it is time to talk about. The control panel with a monitor can be located at a distance of up to 165 feet from the launcher tripod. That is, the operator can be located in a more or less safe place. Even if the enemy quickly finds the point of fire, then the crew has a lot of chances to survive. After the first launch, the Russians did not determine the location of the Ukrainian anti-tank crew. The flying missile engine distracts attention and makes one afraid. The tank operators assumed that the shelling was being carried out from the javelins, so they took up positions around the burning tank. The second shot was no less successful. The second tank burst into flames along with the crew. Surveyors have a high attention to detail, so Dube immediately understood what the essence of anti-tank warfare was. First, you just need to remain calm and not doubt your abilities. Second, you need to aim at the most vulnerable spot. For a tank, this is the ammunition storage area. For a column of tanks, these are the lead and trailing tanks. However, the Russians were in no hurry to retreat. Only after the third shot and the third hit tank, they realized that this was not a javelin. The tank operators decided to continue the breakthrough, hoping that they would be less vulnerable on the move. Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers rushed to Shandrigolovo. A breakthrough could not have happened if this battle had taken place near Chernigov or Kiev. But the landscape of Donbas often does not provide an opportunity to hide. The road to Shandrigolovo runs in open country between fields. Any transport is visible at a glance. After the defeat of the fourth tank, several armored personnel carriers and Tiger armored vehicles decided to disperse across the field. But even off the road, there was still nowhere to hide, with only the plain and farmers' fields around.